Well, hey folks, it's your old pal, King Waspinator. Welcome back to Total Party Skills. Be sure to hit like and subscribe. My subscriber count has more than doubled over the just course of the last week or so. I'm sure some of y'all haven't seen some of my older videos I've done about some of the books I've written. Uh, I've done some stuff recently about Orc and Bone, which is an OSR setting. At the end of writing Orc and Bone, when I was having to copy paste in the OGL license, I just had this odd kind of dirty feeling because it's just this the OGL license just really made me feel distinctly like, oh, this isn't really mine in a way. Other people can riff off it as they want. It's derived from other people's rules, all that kind of stuff. But there are things about the overall OSR design philosophy I still really like and appreciate. I like the more simplified, stripped back, early days feel of it. For my own rule system, I basically have taken that and applied it to the White Wolf rule system, which I played a lot of White Wolf games back in my youth, and so I still have kind of an attachment and familiarity with their operating system. And I kind of changed things up a bit and have created a simplified OSR version of that never existed as kind of the basis for the various titles I've been putting out. And the first one that's kind of in terms of its own setting and concept that is a bit White Wolfy would be Ghosts of the Shadow Zone. On the surface, it's basically me attempting to make a more playable version of Wraith, where you still have some of the themes of like the duality of spirit, and yet doesn't pit all your players against each other, and is a bit more of a simpler and easier to get your head around kind of supernatural afterlife. However, that is not all that it is. About halfway through the book, it kind of leads you through, what the player characters as ghosts would be learning as they discover, like, just this weird, screwed up, kind of like really dark version of Beetlejuice kind of afterlife that I have set up in here. Um, and then you like find out like there's all these mortal conspiracy groups that practice occult skills out there in the world that have been manipulating, humankind from behind the scenes for thousands of years, all that kind of stuff. And so there's also the possibility to play, occultists and members of those organizations, some of which include this Lesbian Illuminati, which, famously I have my Secrets of the Lesbian Illuminati source book, which describes basically their recruitment and training process in a fictional college, that is also talked about in the main Ghost of the Shadow Zone, because it's a major site where a lot of ghosts might have retreats. The ghosts in this world do not have like a body attribute. They entirely float on their sanity and their spirit attribute scores. And so in order for them to be like finally destroyed, so to speak, they have to lose all of their sanity and their morale. And all that really does is like condenses them down to just being a will-o'-the-wisp kind of like just like semi-sentient light in the afterworld. They can't recover from that, but like you can't destroy a spirit down any further than that. It just loses all ability to be usable, as a player character for sure. Ghosts have retreats, which is some like location from their mortal life, or even a person from their mortal life that they have enough attachment to that they're able to actually recover their status levels that they lose. Otherwise, they don't regain lost status levels just naturally over time like you do when you're alive. There are ways for them to gain status by exchanging it with other ghosts or being given to them by other ghosts, but a lot of this kind of comes with strings attached. It's very much like a dark, afterlife survival game if you run it for ghosts. But as I say, the book kind of just presents it as if that's the main premise, as just a way to introduce the setting to the reader through the lens of someone discovering the afterlife, because the afterlife is kind of key to understanding even the mortal activities of sorcery that goes on. There's three cults. You got the head of the jackal, which is like your classic satanic banker kind of setup, that at the core of it is actually controlled by the ancient necromancer Anubis. There's the Global Voodoo Syndicate, which is kind of paired up with the head of the jackal. On the surface, they seem like a bunch of international voodoo drug smugglers, but they're a front operation for the Nubian Brotherhood, which is, you know, like an ancient order of African monster hunters that traces all their lineage back to the ancient kingdom of Nubia and southern Egypt, which is also somewhat touched on in my expedition to ancient Egypt setting, and as is Anubis's presence. So it's kind of like an ongoing story arc throughout the history of the timeline that I've kind of developed between my games. And then there's the famous lesbian Illuminati, you know, as mentioned. So I also have another source book for The Young and the Restless Dead that starts to introduce some of the other kind of supernatural creatures as potentially playable things for the setting, like vampires. Young and the Restless Dead is kind of like focuses in on Hollywood, 1970s occult horror movie Hollywood, as a setting where, you know, you have like Olivia de Havilland as a mummy from ancient Egypt who's got like a cabal of actors who she's been turning into living mummies, you know, in exchange for their, you know, servitude and all that kind of stuff. And that way they can, like, you know, cynically buy another couple decades of looking young and beautiful, even if they're condemned to, like, you know, centuries of looking, you know, like a desiccated corpse afterwards. And the, you know, there's within them, there's also a group that's been corrupted by the head of the jackal, where, you know, the actors who were told that they, you know, like, we're going to go through this ritual and kill you, and then we're going to put your spirit back into your body. Well, instead of that happening, the spirit of some satanic banker or commercial, you know, mega tycoon is given their body instead, and they're left as ghosts. And so some of them have, like, been taking over the bodies of recently deceased homeless people. So you have kind of like a Hollywood zombie thing going on there. There's vampires in the setting that are descended from the Spanish colonists that first came to California. I actually put Zorro in there. Zorro is a character. Zorro played himself in the movie at one point. Is kind of the gag I'm running with. There's some stuff on like the censorship board. I go a bit more into detail into like some of the martial arts mysticism that I started to introduce in Secrets of the Illuminati by bringing in, you know, martial arts schools into the college environment. In this one, there's a wire fighters union from Hong Kong, kind of like a early days of Bruce Lee themed kind of thing going on there. They're kind of like an X factor into this emergent war behind the scenes of Hollywood between these supernatural factions, because they're kind of new to the scene and just, you know, see how things go. There's also like a presence of the global voodoo syndicate in Hollywood. Where they're trying to like infiltrate Hollywood from the bottom up to try to like source out where all the vampires are, so that eventually they'll be able to like have like a night of long knives and take the vampires that rule Hollywood out. All of which remains to be seen in your own campaigns and how you decide to play with all that. But also just by providing like the rules for these things, you can also introduce vampires and start to bring in other kinds of supernatural things into the game. Also, like, you know, taking over the living or, you know, possessing a recently deceased body is not terribly hard in this game. They put more barriers to that in Wraith. The only real barrier to that in this setting is that no one's going to really tell the player characters how to do that, or that they can do that even necessarily until they observe it in action and kind of just figure it out on their own. There's a lot of that to this game, especially if you're, like I said, it's like a dark survival game where the characters are just kind of started off, you just died, here's what's going on, here's an NPC you can talk to briefly for a few answers, but he's not going to stick around and solve all your problems, and then it's just kind of just a scramble to survive this terrible nightmare environment. Some of the, like, the demons and spirits that are to be found, like a lot of the non-sentient animal life, like they all merge together into these big gestalt creatures. So like they'll be like just like flowing, oozing rivers of animal spirits that have all like melded together into some sort of combination of something from Cthulhu and Hellraiser at the same time. Here and there, like there's still a few lingering ghosts of dinosaurs that you know prowl the edges of the Shadow City, and you know, there's all sorts of interesting adventure potential. Just it depends on you to use your mind and come up with something to do with it. As also just as a World of Darkness light. That's more approachable because, yeah, you have these different kinds of supernatural beings, but they're not as rigidly subdivided into a billion subcategories You know, and also introduces a few other things, you know, as time will go on and has already gone on. Just wait, Pax Luporum, which I'm writing, which is kind of basically the same premise, but set in Rome and focused more around werewolves of the original Roman population, because I'm just playing with the idea that Romulus and Remus were raised by a wolf, and what all can you do with that in terms of storytelling stuff. So you'll just have to wait for that to come out. But in the meantime, you know, check out Ghost of the Shadow Zone. I know a lot of people like, you know, like the title of this and are curious about it. It might not be exactly what you think it is, but it is kind of a joke in a joke. But it's also like, it doesn't take it unseriously. I don't know. You'd have to read it to find out what I mean about that. And to use either of these books, this is the rule book you will need to use, which you can find on TTRPG if you want it as a PDF, or if you're willing to wait a few days and get the actual, you know, physical printed version, you can get it on Amazon.com. I will at some point go back and put links into the description box below for you to follow if you're so inclined. As I've said, you know, like, I can't really go back to my old job because I've broken my chest a year ago and I just don't have the energy I used to have. So I kind of need to try to make this whole thing work in terms of trying to be, you know, a writer and trying to make at least some money to justify my existence here in the house. So I don't have a Patreon. I'm not asking for super chats. I'm not trying to sell you mugs or dumb plushie that just looks like a, you know, Funko Pop doll. I actually am a genuine content creator in that I've actually written stuff that you can have printed and hold in your hand and sit on a shelf and thumb through and actually use and have some fun with your friends online or in person. And also the books themselves are a good read. That's all based on, all my books are based on like just classic, easy to understand B-movie, Pulp Fiction kind of ideas, which are the kinds of things that work best as tabletop role-playing game scenarios, more so than they actually even, you know, did as the movies that some of these ideas came from originally. If you want to play Exorcist from the point of view of the spirits trying to possess the little girl, then you want to check out Ghost of the Shadow Zone. Until later, stay waspinated.